We are talking Blood and Snow from 2023. And this is a low-budget science fiction horror movie clearly influenced by John Carpenter's The Thing. This movie stars Vernon and it takes place, I think, in the Arctic. And we have this kind of research facility and there is some type of accident and a researcher is killed. Now, he's there a little surreptitiously, kind of like doing some type of classified experiment. But he is out there with like a female member of this kind of research team, and she is rescued by some fellow workers and brought back to the station. But she starts to exhibit strange behaviour, and it becomes apparent not everything is as it seems, that she may well be kind of being controlled by an alien parasite that wants to spread, so to speak. And it's up to this kind of crew of this isolated Arctic station to figure out a way to stop it and survive. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So, a little bit of a prefix here. This movie is low budget and it is not got the budget to have big VFX moments and set pieces like The Thing. You can clearly see the influence, the setup, and the kind of the location, the kind of the similar kind of like the way these kind of the paranoia through the kind of the crew and stuff, but it's not got that body horror in this one. But let's talk about what it does have. Now this to be honest with you, I've seen a couple of reviews on it and they weren't kind. But I think for a low-budget movie, it has an interesting premise. And yes, the premise is not original, it is practically The Thing. But nonetheless, it still is... I mean, there's so many movies that are like something else these days. It's very rare you'll get a completely kind of original movie. So you've got to take it at face value. You know, is the movie on its merits still an interesting idea? Yes, it is. You know, it's not beat for beat like The Thing. Like I said, it's more of there's someone who's infected and kind of being controlled rather than the kind of the more monstrous elements of The Thing. And I suspect that's possibly more for budgetary reasons than anything else. But nonetheless, there are a little bit of differences here. One of the key things that I liked about this movie is when I finished watching this, I thought, has this got two writers or more than one basically? And it has. And the reason I asked that question is because there's vast differences in some of the kind of like the quality of the writing. And on one hand, and we'll come on to the other, I think this does have some good ideas and some good writing. In particular, the way some of the characters are portrayed. Now, I think this is a mixture of some good writing and some good performances. For example, we have this character of Luke, who, by all accounts, is kind of like your typical, like, nasty guy that is kind of somewhat of an antagonist. He's misogynistic, he's abusive, he's a drinker, he's very aggressive. But I found his character pretty interesting because you kind of see it from his point of view in some ways. And in an actual fact, I'd go as far as to say he's probably right, but it's coming from a character that is traditionally, you know, definitely going to get killed because he's like the kind of the bully of the group. But when it's all said and done, you think actually this guy is kind of like what he's saying is actually probably the smartest thing to do. And his performance, the guy's performance, was also strong. His performance with like his main kind of co-star, this other guy, these are the two guys that initially find our female survivor, I think is pretty strong because they do play like genuine kind of like people who have a kind of somewhat of a friendly relationship but are kind of somewhat at odds sometimes. And I think both actors, when they're playing against each other, are pretty strong. In particular, the character and the actor who plays the character of Luke, I think is very good. But there are some other performances and the way these characters are written where I do think there are sequences where I think the writing is strong, and there are sequences where I think, to be fair, I think the acting is solid for the most part. There's maybe a couple of performances that aren't as strong, but for the most part, I've got to say, I think the actors actually do elevate a very uneven script. But there are elements of the script that I do think are relatively strong. Now, the movie's budget is obviously has an effect here, but I think the movie creators, the director, the producers, work within their limitations to make this movie look reasonable without kind of overextending themselves. I think the external sequences, and are well done with this kind of like tracked vehicle, and so when they're going through the snow, there's sort of sense of isolation in this kind of base, which admittedly looks a little bit big for the kind of that this research station. This building has like massive kind of halls and stuff, and it's like, I don't think that would be a research facility, but whatever. I still think it was like it kind of was believable to a point, and if you can kind of consider the budget. And I think the ideas here about these guys who are kind of like The Thing, really, to be fair, they're underqualified to be dealing with this kind of stuff, and the kind of the squabbles that ultimately ensue, and the kind of the shifting loyalties. Again, I think it's some interesting stuff, and I think the writing here is, and we're going to come on to what doesn't work, but there are elements that I think do work, and again, this is why I thought there was maybe more than one writer, but it's a stark difference to some of the crappier writing that we're going to talk about in a minute. The movie itself, I think, is reasonably well shot. It's somewhat kind of pedestrian in regards to its direction, but it's certainly kind of not bad. And yeah, the story's kind of not original, but I still found it somewhat interesting. What doesn't work? As I've said, the writing here, I think, is uneven. As much as I like some of it, there are elements here where, there's like, for example, there's an obvious joke where there's like an emergency situation, and this kind of guy who's like very by the book, he says, oh, you shouldn't press this, shouldn't press this in case of like such an emergency, and they go for this big rigmarole, and then the boss says, we should have just pressed this. It goes, oh, but it wasn't, it's like this whole like little comedy bit, it doesn't work. It's just not, it doesn't like, what the idea was doesn't translate to a kind of like a bit. There are some moments kind of like that. And some of the character motivations and kind of the way the characters are depicted, I can see where they wanted to go, but how it comes across is completely different. So, for example, our main guy, our protagonist, who is the other guy in this kind of duo of characters who kind of find the survivor initially, he has like a crush on this like female researcher, and I think the writers here thought it would be romantic, but it comes across as desperate, kind of a little bit creepy, and like this guy has just got the horn. Immediately he sees this kind of female researcher, but I think the researchers think it's kind of like romantic. But that's not how it comes across. The guy just comes like making like stupid and bad decisions and being a massive creeper to this girl. That's the difference. It's like, it doesn't work. The way they've done it, I think, oh, this looks like, he's like playing chess with her, and it's all like romantic. He just comes across as a massive creep. I don't think it's the actor's fault, if I'm honest. I do think that's the writing. There's a few other instances as well where the dialogue is kind of clunky. The actor's going to do the best with it. But I just think it's the script is really mixed. The acting, I gotta say, I think that for the most part is pretty good. But there are a couple of performances that are just a little bit on the weaker side, if we're being honest here. I think the main issue with this movie, it is nearly purely a dialogue-driven movie. If you're wanting to watch this movie and it to be like The Thing, you are going to be disappointed, because like the idea here is just like The Thing, but the execution, because of the budget, I would imagine, it's a very, very dialogue driven movie, and as such the pacing is extraordinarily slow. I still found the premise somewhat interesting, to be honest, but I can completely understand why people would be put off by the kind of the people talking in rooms aesthetic that this movie has, and it is nearly the whole way through. And even when we do see kind of more alien things, it's slight, and a lot of the stuff is kind of like off camera. So it's kind of like, unfortunately, just probably the budget, as I say, but it just feels like a case of blue balls in regards to what you probably want to see compared to what you actually are seeing. So the movie itself, I think, is fine. I think it's an okay low budget watch if you are not expecting a actual kind of visceral experience. I think the idea, albeit taken merely from the thing, is kind of a watchable idea. I think the performances, you know, are genuinely pretty good and actually quite strong in some instances, and the writing is good in places but terrible in others. So a real uneven movie overall. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. It's okay if you don't mind a kind of a low budget talky film. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.